It's not my intention to obsess about what's happening south of the border. In fact, those of us in the media or in the periphery of the media, we're often told that these sorts of topics, the opioid crisis, fentanyl, and things like that, they're the topic to avoid. It depresses people. Everybody knows someone who's been a victim, and so tread lightly in these subjects. But I am of the belief at this point that it's time to actually wage real war on the Mexican drug cartels. 4 American citizens were kidnapped in Mexico. They traveled through Texas into northern Mexico in a white minivan. They entered Matamoros from Brownsville, Texas, the southernmost tip of Texas near the Gulf Coast. All 4 Americans were placed in a vehicle and taken from the scene by armed men. They have been found. 4 kidnapped. 2 of them have been murdered. 1 is wounded and 1 is unharmed. They had gone to Mexico for tummy tucks. You get cheaper plastic surgery in Mexico. It's something people do. They were mistaken for Haitian smugglers, and the drug cartels don't like the competition. And the drug cartels rounded them up and killed 2 of them, shot a 3rd one. The 4th one was unharmed. That's the situation. And it is absurd to me that we're doing nothing. It is absurd to me that we are treating this as just a kidnapping. Let me give you some specifics here that you may not know. I did the research for you, so you don't have to. Do you know how many Americans were kidnapped in Mexico in the year 2021? That's the latest we have complete data for. I don't know why we don't have 2022. I went looking for it. We're a year behind. Do you know how many Americans were kidnapped in 2021? Over 600 Americans were kidnapped in Mexico in 2021. In 2020, it was over 800. Most, not all, but most are dual citizens. They are Mexican Americans. They have American citizenship. They have Mexican citizenship. And they have gone home to see family. Many of them are kidnapped. Some of them are American green card holders. Either way, that's too many. In 2022, a Texas couple, they were gay. They'd gone on vacation in Mexico. They were kidnapped by Mexican drug cartel. They were tortured, shot in the head, and carved up and dismembered and their body parts spread. Another American couple in 2022 was burned alive in their car because their family would not pay money for their return. They didn't think they would have to. Don't negotiate with the terrorists. Well, except these aren't terrorists. They're drug cartels, because the Biden administration will not declare them terrorists. Can you imagine? What would the response be of the American government if 625 Americans were kidnapped by ISIS or Al-Qaeda? 625, that's the number from 2021. 831 from 2020. 625 Americans in 2021 were kidnapped by Mexican drug cartels. If it was ISIS, if it was Al-Qaeda, we would be going to war. But with the cartels, we're worried about diplomatic niceties with Mexico. The Mexican government can't stand up to the cartels. In some cases, they're in the pocket of the cartels. We've now had 4 more Americans this week go to Mexico. 2 of them will not come home alive. The 3rd one is in jeopardy. Why are we treating this like some sort of diplomatic incident with Mexico? The cartels are in our country. They are targeting us in this country. The MS-13 gang, they're around the country. They're in your neighborhood. They're selling drugs. They're killing your children with fentanyl. They're getting your kids addicted to drugs. They're killing each other. They're killing other people. And we are treating this as if it's just a crime story. This is not a crime story. This is an all-out war on the United States of America by Mexican drug cartels, largely funded as a proxy war by China. We are funding Ukraine to stop Russia so that we ourselves do not have to fight Russia. China is funding the drug cartels so that they can kill all the would-be American soldiers, and China can take us without firing a shot. This is a proxy war with China. We don't even realize it, and we're the ones dying because we're not even fighting back. We're doing nothing. How many Americans must die for Joe Biden to do something? And by the way, in fairness, intellectual honesty, bipartisan problem, Donald Trump could have designated these groups foreign terrorist organizations, and he chose not to. He could have done it too. Neither side wants to treat this as what it actually is, a war. In Colombia in the 1990s, the American government finally had enough of the Medellin drug cartels. Working with the Colombians, we went to war. We sent special forces. We sabotaged their supply lines. We sabotaged their manufacturing facilities. We collected data. We rounded them up, and we brought them to justice. Some killed by the military, many of them packed away for the rest of their lives in maximum security prisons. We were serious then. In fact, we were so serious and so good at it, it ceded ground to these Mexican drug cartels because the Colombian cartels no longer existed. Now we need to do the same to the Mexicans. It's a bipartisan failure as our kids continue to die. It should be unacceptable to all of us that 4 Americans were kidnapped in Mexico by Mexican drug cartels. Who cares? They got them confused with Haitian smugglers. They could have let them go. But they didn't. They chose to kill 2, shot a 3rd, let the 4th go. The Mexican government is doing nothing. The Mexican government is corrupt. AMLO, the Mexican president, is considered to be in the pocket of the Mexican drug cartels. This is the guy who famously decided hugs instead of bullets. That was his philosophy. That's what he said. Hugs instead of bullets. He wanted to hug the cartels, bring them into society, integrate them some way into society, convinced that they were only doing drugs because they couldn't make money elsewhere. So convince them to make money elsewhere, they'll stop the drugs. In fact, what he did is he showed them the rest of the Mexican economy, and they've taken over that as well. Our administration, and it is our administration, Joe Biden, whether you like him or not, he is your president. And your president of the United States is willing to fund a war in Ukraine, but he can't go to East Palestine, Ohio. Your president is willing to fund the Taiwanese protecting themselves, but he's not willing to fund the American military to go after the Mexican drug cartels. Your president, the president of the United States, he is unwilling to do what needs to be done to take care of American citizens. And for those of you saying, but Trump, I've already said he didn't either, but he's not president now. Joe Biden is president right now. You know, interestingly enough, this administration is thinking they're going to have to reinstate some of what Donald Trump did. Yes, I know, hard for them to admit it. This is from the New York Times today. The United States is said to be considering reinstating detention of migrant families. The Biden administration is considering reviving the practice of detaining migrant families who cross the border illegally, the same policy the president shut down over the past 2 years because he wanted a more humane immigration system. Although no final decisions have been made, the move would be a stark reversal for President Biden, who came into office promising to adopt a more compassionate approach to the border after the harsh policies of his predecessor former President Donald Trump. The Biden administration has largely ended the practice of family detention, instead releasing families into the United States temporarily and using ankle bracelets, traceable cell phones, or other methods to keep track of them. But the administration has turned to more restrictive measures as it struggles to handle the rise of migrants fleeing authoritarian governments and economic ruin in their countries. Officials also fear a surge at the border after May 11th, when a public health measure that has allowed authorities to swiftly expel migrants expires. So we've got a massive wave of immigrants coming into this country, and he's going to have to resort to something Donald Trump did. But listen to this. This is one of the key paragraphs here. Listen to this. The Biden administration is struggling to handle a rise in migrants fleeing authoritarian governments and economic ruin in their own countries. We can and should build a wall. But if we want to take a multifaceted approach to solve this for the long term, the gangs in these countries, many of them are funded by the drug cartels. They operate as an arm of Mexican drug cartels in these other countries. Cut off the head of the snake. Get rid of the drug cartels. Many of these authoritarian governments are propped up by the money from these gangs and cartels. You get rid of the cartels, you begin to collapse authoritarian regimes. You begin to return Central America to normal. Going to war with the drug cartels brings peace and calm to Central America. The Biden administration constantly says they don't want to build a wall. They want to address the underlying problems. They want to solve those problems. Otherwise, people are going to keep coming to the southern border. You solve those problems by killing the drug cartels. You solve those problems by lobbing a few missiles at manufacturing facilities to signal we mean business. You take on the drug cartels and you show the Mexican government you are going to take on the drug cartels, and you actually solve the problems the Biden administration continues to say it wants to solve and never solves. You take on the drug cartels, you save American lives. You take on the drug cartels, you return stability to Mexico and Central America. You take on the drug cartels, you show China we actually do mean business, the business of caring for American citizens and treating our national security as we're supposed to treat it as a nation. You take on the drug cartels, you're picking a worthy fight, and yet this president will not do it. If he would declare them foreign terrorist organizations, he could go after the American accountants and lawyers who are helping them. And yes, they have American lawyers and accountants helping them. You declare them terrorists, you could go after those as well and begin to cut down their money and their supply chain in this country. The Biden administration hasn't done any of this. They could do it very easily. They do not need Congress to act. They already have the authority to do it. Why are they not? This year, 107,355 Americans are going to die before this year is up from fentanyl. And this administration, at best, will treat it as a crime story. At worst, just as a public health story. They could treat it as a war. They're treating everything else as a war. They want a war on cancer. They want a war on poverty. They want a war on assault weapons. Why not have a war on the drug cartels, Mr. President?